Employee protection has always been an area of high interest for governments. However, both the digital age and emergence of personal data as a modern currency have impacted upon these protections. In this session, we talk to Larisa Munteanu, data protection lawyer and deputy DPO, to discuss her recently published paper in the European Data Protection Law Review. Co-authored with Technical Director Mark Povey of JSIG, the paper considers how employee data protection is ensured in the relationship between employers and trade unions. This is the JSIG Privacy Deep Dive. Larisa, thanks for joining me today. So, the article is titled Data Protection, a Firewall Between Employers and Trade Unions. What's it about?
So we wanted to analyze the employees' data protection. So when we discuss data protection in general and we analyze data subjects, we chose exactly employees because they are very vulnerable in different situations and in the relationship between trade unions and employers. That was what we wanted to achieve. And we decided to take this route because we wanted to interpret different legal provisions and to support both parties, so both the employers and the trade unions, and not to take the side of any of those.
Yeah, of course. So what was the process? What was the process you went through to get to the point of publishing the article?
Well, honestly, it was a lengthy process, but it was very lovely because the EDPL team was very supporting. They always answered questions and helped us with any information that we needed. Yeah. We started the research in late August, I think, but since it's a double peer-reviewed paper and journal, it took a while and it was published just in April.
Well, yes, so quite a lot of work behind the scenes, yeah, I guess, to get to the point of publication. And so where did you get the inspiration for this subject? Is this just from your sort of interest in it as in the space as an academic concept, or is this a topic or challenge you've come across in your work practicing as a data protection officer?
I think it's a combination of them both. So me and Mark have faced this challenge with the trade union membership and trade union members several times with our clients. But at the same time, when I studied and carried out some research in the field in data protection, I realized that there are not many resources available with guidance and advice on how to take care, how to protect trade union membership. Okay.
Very good. So, and I know the phrase firewall in the title, that's an interesting one, and quite maybe a loaded word. So can you explain a little bit more about the word firewall, obviously in terms of data protection and of course, obviously in the relationship between employers and the trade unions? How did you come up with this idea of the firewall?
Yeah, so me and Mark spent some hours trying to find the right word for this one. It's actually what we had in mind was to illustrate in words, a shield. So data protection can sometimes be seen as a shield between employers and trade unions. And this is why we used firewall. It's a better used word in this context because a firewall is a protection mechanism and prevents from unauthorized access. And since employers and trade unions at the same time might use data protection as their argument to stop transfers of data between these two parties, we decided it's something artistic, let's say, to use this word in this context.
Given that, I mean, we're obviously talking about both sides of this relationship, but who's the intended audience for this article? Who did you have in mind when you're going through this lengthy process? Who's going to consume this information ultimately?
Yeah, well, we didn't want to narrow down our audience. We wanted it to be read by professionals and non-professionals at the same time. So in our opinion, anyone that is a trade union member or that works with trade union members can read it and can find guidance, we hope, and advice that we try to interpret, and we try to solve some issues, but rather not by giving solutions, but by giving some guidelines, a framework to work in, and in order to better understand the challenges in the field and to clarify, let's say. So anyone that needs some clarifications about trade union membership is welcome to read it.
And obviously, for some of our listeners that might be qualified in this area, they will certainly understand the special status of the trade union membership in the world of data protection. But could you expand a little for us on, why you believe that trade union membership is important and what its status is in personal data protection?
Of course, we chose trade union membership because it's very important, not only in data protection, but in general. So there are two values that have driven us there. The first one is related to the technical details from data protection. That means in GDPR, Article 9 states that trade union membership is considered a special category of personal data. And that means in practice that the rule is you're not allowed to process it. And the exception is you can process it in certain circumstances under certain exceptions. Secondly, the social value is very important and must be highlighted in this context, because trade unions act as supporting mechanism for employees and are very, very important in today's society and have been for a very long time.
Thanks, I think that's really clear. So we've obviously talked about the title of your paper, how you got there, why this concept of the firewall, why trade union membership is important in the world of personal data protection, and really then I'd like to hear a bit more about your main areas of analysis through the paper. Sort of talk us through your paper and give us the highlight reel from this fantastic piece of work that you've done.
So I will focus on the data protection aspects and not the social aspect and the introduction or any technical things. The main interest that we had with this paper was to clarify two different facets of this. The first one is the data controllership. So trade unions and employers might act as a data controller or a data processor or as joint controllers. Therefore, it's important to establish which is their role. And this is because we will discuss and we will apply the accountability principle. At the same time, what we analyzed within the paper is the applicability and the way data subjects exercise their right to data portability, which is one of the innovative rights brought by the GDPR. So I think this encompasses in very broad lines what we analyzed there.
Sure. So really going back to sort of an earlier point that you touched on, but I really want to get in the relationship between employers and data and the trade unions, obviously regarding data protection. I'm interested to understand a little bit about how you categorize the data processor, data controller, and does this relationship cross over into a joint controller status, or take me through that.
Yes. So usually we have this conversation with clients as well, and I try to be very clear and to make this as digestible as possible.
Yeah.
So a data controller, very briefly and without any legal vocabulary, is the company, the organization that decides how, when, and why data is processed. So gives the instructions and tells everything. Whilst the data processor does not have this right, but actually just executes what is being told to do and how and when to process the data, etc., according to their agreement, their processing agreement. At the same time, you mentioned about the joint controllership. So it's very easy with the joint controllers. If we have two organizations that decide the rules of the processing, that makes them joint controllers. And even if a situation might seem to present a controller and the processor, if you check thoroughly the agreement, you might find out that they're actually joint controllers because they both have the right and they both give instructions on the processing activity.
Okay, thank you. That's really clear. So is this something you come across in real life? Is it just, these aren't just theoretical concepts, right? You're saying you come across this in your practice as a DPO.
Yeah.
Where do these categories fall in relation to this paper, to the employer, to the trade union? Is it one or the other or a combination? How does this look in practice?
To give you an example of this data controller and data processor relationship, for example, if we take a school will be a data controller that processes data of teachers and students and contractors, etc. Mm-hmm. If the school decides to implement a system, a training platform for students and teachers simultaneously, that platform will act generally as a data processor because the school decides the rules for the processing and the platform just follows these rules and will process the data according to those guidelines. So it's something that we come across very often, and there are even some challenging situations in which it's not very clear. It's a very, very gray zone whether they are controllers or processors, and this is what we analyzed in the paper as well, because it wasn't very, very clear whether trade unions act as controllers or as processors. But I cannot tell you the conclusion that we reached right now, because I would ruin the fun of reading the paper.
Well, I understand that. So what, so is there anything that is considered or you consider innovative that's come out of the article? The reason that you've gone in deep into this subject and explored it with Mark. Are there any innovative thoughts, concepts, or anything new that you've come up with in the field of data protection that can now add value and be applied going forward?
I think two things should be mentioned here. The first one is that we tried to come up with the definition for the concept of trade union membership. In the GDPR, it is included in Article 9, but it's not defined anywhere. And I couldn't find any reference to any definition in different resources or academic papers. Okay. So we try to bring this to life and to fill this gap, let's say. Secondly, we realized that in terms of data portability, usually we discuss about interoperability between the parties, and that was mentioned as being vertical or horizontal. And when we analyzed the relationship between employers and trade unions, we came to the conclusion that that's not horizontal, that's not vertical. And we came up with the third category that we believe it should be included there.
Can you explore on the third category, or is this tied up in the paper?
Yes, so it's called diagonal interoperability. This is the name we decided to add to it. And of course, it's a residual category, that it's not vertical, it's not horizontal. So you don't have a relationship that goes like this from the upstream provider to the downside provider, but you don't have the relationship for equal size or equal level providers. It's very relative situation. It's a very gray zone that sometimes it's horizontal, sometimes it's vertical, and it's really a case-by-case analysis.
So is it ever a joint controllership, or that never crosses into that space?
Well, it's related to controllership, not only joint controllership, because data portability stems from being a controller. A data subject can exercise the right to data portability to a controller. So it's very important to first acknowledge who of the parties is the controller in order to be able to know where to exercise your right to data portability.
I suppose one of my final questions, the importance for me, and I think that the great thing that we get out of this, the academic thinking and academic deep dives that you've done is as we're discussing its application. What does it mean? Where does it take us? How does it apply? How can this be used in the real world and not stay just as excellent academic thinking? So do you think the work you've done has resolved or solved any uncertainties in this area?
Well, the article is 11 pages long, so I would doubt that someone will solve uncertainties in 11 pages. That would be kind of concerning. So what we tried to do was actually, as I said, to provide guidance, to help anyone that has uncertainties. But definitely that doesn't mean these issues are solved or that we claim we have ended any discussion or what is trade union membership or this kind of interoperability that I have told you about. So it's just advice.
Just, of course. And very much on a case-by-case basis, but it feels like what you formed is a fantastic base to understand this subject and to be able to advise from. So where could anyone find this paper? If they wanted to seek out the paper that you've had published, where would they go to?
The paper is published in the EDPL review, European Data Protection Law Review. It is the first issue of this volume of this year. So you can just check their website. We'll add it here or in the description. And they can access it there and check the abstract first to see if it really suits their interest, and then read through.
Fantastic. Well, if you have nothing else to add on this interesting and definitely complex subject, but hopefully that's given a nice insight into the challenges that exist within this space, we'll leave that there today. Thanks, Larisa, for joining us. I know you've kindly written a blog which is going to support this conversation, so people can access that on our website at josigg.com. And we look forward to further discussions in deeper areas and in future deep dives as we continue to unpick the fantastic world of data privacy and data protection. Thanks so much, Larisa.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you very much.